Hello, 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 and welcome to the Blue Oval Podcast. I am Ben Weissel, and joining me, as always, Garrett Zatlin. How's it going, man?
We picked the worst week to do rankings.
Yeah.
It was the worst possible week. I'm so tired. I was with some friends last night, and one of them goes, "You look a little rough, man." I go, "Thanks, dude. That was really flattering." I mean, I've had a long week, but so yeah, man, we got a lot to talk about today.
This would be a busy week without rankings. Like
Yeah,
there would be a lot going on, a lot to talk about, like absent rankings, and rankings in themselves are like a full-time busy time.
it's a
So
beast.
we thought we picked a good time to do them because it's the end of July. Not a whole lot going on, but hey, you never know with the coaching carousel, with the transfer portal, with the NCAA settlements, all those things we will get into. But before we do, hey, we got a new rating and review on Apple Podcasts. We're up to 92 there, where we got one new one on Spotify as well. We're up to 165. The new review, though, and I'm gonna read this in its entirety because
Oh no.
I loved it. Subject line: Great job. I am a former D3 runner and still like to keep up to date on collegiate running. So thank you for your podcast. You two have good chemistry / banter and makes your show very easy to listen to. I'm going to skip ahead. Garrett, the one with glasses, like I love the specification there,
I love that.
needs to start auditioning for animated movies / shows. His voice, excuse me, is made for it.
I think that's flattering. I think, and I'll take it. Unfortunately, my voice is under the copyright of Blue Oval Podcast, and actually, technically, Ben's is too. Now that he's under
Yeah.
contract, so. But thank you. I really appreciate that. That was actually really, really cool. So thank you all
I
for doing that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I loved it, and it's he didn't go as far as like to say you have like a face for radio, so I think it was a compliment. Like that's where I think it obviously could have turned into an insult. So I think he's just saying you have a good voice, which is great.
The bar is so low here at Blue Oval Podcast. So, anyways, all right, let's jump into what we all want to talk about. Ben, we're not going to talk about rankings today. We can't. We have no time. There's just no shot. We'll do it next week. We have two major pieces of news. Where do you want to start first?
Let's start with what I think is going to begin quite a lot of movement in the coaching ranks, and that is the news that Coach Sean Carlson, formerly of Tennessee, is now going to be the director at Colorado University. A seismic hire, a huge program, landing a big fish. We had talked about like different possibilities for Colorado, and we were kind of stumped. We had come up with some names, but none of them felt quite right. And I think that's because we had seen a lot of movement over the last couple years of some top distance coaches. And it seemed like they were all pretty settled, especially the younger guys. And I think we both kind of thought that Sean Carlson fit that bill. Someone that was settled into his position after changing a couple years ago from Notre Dame. And yet he makes the move to Colorado, a huge win, I think, for the Colorado program. We'll get into more of that in a second. But also, I think a very telling indication of, I think, where Sean Carlson wants his coaching career to go. And I can expound more on that, but I just want to get your quick thoughts first here.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is like the Alabama head coaching job. Wetmore was Saban, and this is the head coaching job. And it's the best and worst job in the country.
Yep.
It's the best job because it's Colorado, and like you can develop Americans. It's been proven that you can develop Americans and win titles there. It's kind of like it's a place everyone wants to be. At least when you're growing up and you read Running with the Buffaloes.
Yeah.
That roster is also really not ideal. The women lose a ton of scoring from last year. The men have almost borderline, almost nothing coming in
Yep.
terms of like new recruits, new names. They weren't really amazing last year. Now, granted, I imagine athletes are going to follow him there, but To me, it was kind of like an Alabama situation in terms of like the Alabama football, and I'm not too surprised because who doesn't want to go to Colorado?
I'm I maybe will push back on that a little bit. I wonder. Yeah, I mean, I think Colorado has a huge advantage just locationally. I think everybody like wants to go train in Boulder, but I wonder if it had lost. And clearly it had not. But I had thought that maybe it had lost a little luster in terms of like maybe like hey that an Oregon the Oregon job is more like uh, not I'm trying to think not valuable,
Well,
but more like more people would be
revered.
attracted to that.
Yeah, more
Yeah,
revered, maybe. Yeah,
yeah,
and, yeah, and like, and I can, and maybe Oregon, right? But like, I think all I'm saying about this is that Colorado's in that, at least that tier
right.
of
That's
the
fair.
entire country is watching this job. People are gonna want this job, and it's held with such prestige, right? Whether or not it's actually the best job, or who knows,
Yeah.
I don't know. But uh, how surprised were you? Scale 1 to 10.
I think I was like an 8. I didn't think Carlson would leave, and I just had mentally checked him off my list of like he's like I said from the at the top. I just thought he was going to like he had started to build such a good foundation at Tennessee that I thought he was going to stick around to like see the fruits of it. Right. He had turned the program around much like he had done at Notre Dame, and it seemed like they really like were invested in him and he was invested in that program. But hey, when Colorado comes calling, I don't fault the guy for wanting to make that move.
Yeah, what surprises me a little bit is that like I wonder what they must have paid him because
That's what I'm
like
curious.
Tennessee's deal was like it's like 200 over 200. Like that's public record.
Yeah.
Um and so like I'm wondering because I think the initial problem with the Colorado job that from what I was hearing was that it came in low. The salary was
Mm,
initially like lower than people were expecting. And so that makes me wonder. I go like, "Whoa, did Colorado have to maybe up the ante to get him? I don't know. It's an interesting situation. It was certainly came out of left field. That it was like an 8. It was like an
yeah.
8. I mean, again, it's like okay, who would want to go to Colorado, depending on who you ask. But yeah, yeah. Now it's gonna be really interesting.
Tennessee's budget is I would imagine quite a bit larger than Colorado's in terms of just their athletic department. And so, if this seems like a situation where I would imagine Tennessee could have matched at least at the offer. I wonder how much negotiating there was, and if that did happen or not. I'm sure they could have if they wanted to. But I ultimately wonder if it was all things equal for Carlson getting a pay raise. I think Colorado's a no-brainer.
Yeah, I mean, I would be surprised if they tried to negotiate. I don't know why.
Yeah,
That's just kind
right.
of how I'd be surprised. Um, I had another follow up question on this. I mean, I actually like from a competitive standpoint, love this move. Colorado's in the Big 12.
Yep.
They can realistically contend with, I mean, it's don't get me wrong. BYU and Oklahoma State are absolutely going to be major challenges on the grass. There's going to be tons of other programs that I'm sure I'm not thinking of off the top of my head. Iowa State too. Um, but the SEC when it comes to like when we see that all of these new like changes are happening with the scholarship and roster allocations, I promise you, there will be SEC programs that were not competitive in cross country that will make investments in cross country and become even more stacked. And guess what? When there's more Power Five programs that are going to have more scholarships to give elite high schoolers, that means the pool of elite high schoolers is going to be gone much quicker than it usually is. So
Yep.
where do you think they're going to go? Overseas, transfer portal. The recruiting is about to get, in the SEC especially, is about to get extremely aggressive. And because of that, I'm not saying that Carlson's like dodging competition, but it'd be nice if, like, I'm the director of Colorado. I don't really have to deal with the arms race that's happening in the SEC, and I'm still probably getting a decent, at least a decent salary. So
Yeah, and I wonder what kind of budget they promised him too, because I obviously Tennessee, you're having to split that with the sprint side and the field side. But again, I would imagine that budget was big. That pie was bigger. The percent of it, he was probably getting less. And so I'm curious now that and I'm sure there's just value in him being the director at the end of the
yeah,
day. Like just not like he was obviously the head cross country coach, but when you are in charge of the entire track and cross country programs, you can mold the program into your own image, and in a way he just probably could not as just a head coach rather than a director. So I do think there is a lot of value there. One thing that came to mind, and I'm curious if you thought this as well. Him moving to Colorado made me think that maybe not now and maybe not for a while, but this kind of move seems to set him up for uh, coaching more and more professionals, and down the road a professional team. I think if all things go well, you he was never going to be able to have that in Knoxville, and Boulder. That is absolutely something he can do, and I'm curious to know. I'm curious if that was a part of it, because that was one of the first big benefits that came to mind when he made that.
no, I don't. I don't think that's the case at all. I don't. No, I don't think that's the case
Really?
at all. I really don't. I think because okay, so like the pros he quote unquote would be developing are on guys, right? And Dylan Jacobs was supposed to go to OAC like either this year or next year or whenever he finishes his
Well,
degree.
are
So
they?
like,
But I'm saying like in the future, they're not going to be necessarily all on guys. He's going to be coaching a Buffalo team that's sponsored by Nike, and like there is no Nike group in Boulder. Like it's a desirable place. Nike's professional groups are faltering. Like,
I wouldn't say could it happen? Sure. I think it's unlikely. He's 37 years old. Um, he's still brand new to a program that I think we first like. Can he turn this around?
yep.
The bones, the infrastructure of those programs right now is not great. So it's I don't know. I think we're kind of getting way too far ahead here. This is just
Well, I
I just
mean,
don't see it happening at all.
I mean, you don't see it ever happening, like
I
him
don't want to
ever.
say I see it ever happening, but I still think he's just still really young, and
No,
he's
and
only
and but I think that's the point, right? Is like he's young. He could be at a program for 40 years, like if he wanted to be. And so and he's in such demand that he could kind of pick his spot, right? And so if he's picking a spot now where he realistically could be there for decades, like what you could do over the course of those decades, I would have to imagine plays a part in it if you want to stay put somewhere.
yeah. Listen, again, I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think we're just kind of I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves here. So
No, putting the cart before the horse. I realize that, but I do think it is something to keep an eye on, and even if it just means hey, he's coaching like one or two professional athletes now, and like
okay, yeah,
that's happening more and more.
that's a different thing, right? It's just like oh, one of his athletes went pro, and then they're not with
Right.
on, so they're not going to OAC, and
Yeah.
like he's yeah, okay, sure, like I could see that. Um, but kind of pulling the Joey Schumacher card is it will be yeah would be interesting. So
Yeah.
um, let's actually real quick before we move on to NCAA changes. The Tennessee job is open, by the way. I
Yes.
think people are not aware of that now. They think they're just like, wow, he got the Colorado job. I think pretty much a lot of the conversation that we had about the Colorado job would maybe naturally shift to the Tennessee job,
Sure.
but you know, I don't. I think it's less likely that it would be someone like a Diljit or like a Mike Smith or even Jared Kornfeld also at
Oh
NAU.
yeah.
I think it's less likely those people. Like if it wasn't going to be Colorado, it's not going to be Tennessee.
Yeah.
I think this is going to be an extremely big job though,
Mhm.
like a really big job. You're talking. I'm thinking like who would take it? Like who are the thoughts that you have?
Well, Jared Cornfield actually kind of came to mind for this
You think
because
so?
and granted, I know it's not. He's with NAU. He's in a great position. He probably wants to pick his spots very selectively, and he has every right to do so because of the position he's in. But this gives him the opportunity to kind of run the show, at least on the cross country side, and get him that experience. And I think he would be a fantastic hire for Tennessee. Like I think it's a young up and coming guy that can continue this growth that Carlson's shown. I think it makes a lot of sense there for both parties to get him that experience and for them to get someone that has been around top caliber programs and knows how to get cross country teams to the absolute pinnacle. And I think that makes a lot of sense for both parties.
I mean, I like him a lot. I think he's great. Like, I think it'd be a great option. I can't help but wonder. I'm like, man, would Will Palmer want that job? Would Alex Gibby want that job? Would gosh, like who else?
Yeah, Gibby, I don't know. That one, I Will Palmer, I hear, but again, it's like, how much different is that than his job at Florida? Is he going to be given a lot more support there? Like,
Well, I don't know that, but I can tell you that you can at least be competitive with the men in Tennessee. We've seen that being proven. Like at the very least, you're going to
sure,
the national meet, and
yeah,
I haven't seen enough from Florida's to really kind of from Florida's men's program for me to be like, oh, they're definitely going to be making the national meet in the next X years. So I like for him, like also it's a director role, so it would be a boost up, and then I feel like you can win on both sides. So
yeah,
that's
yeah,
my argument.
yeah. I'm trying to think of any other coaches that come to mind, and it's a unique spot because, like, yeah, like you said, it is a director of cross country, but
Right,
it's not director of track. It's like
right,
there aren't very many directors of just cross country out there. Usually that's just called the head cross country coach. It's more like,
yeah.
obviously the title is important, but it does feel kind of more like a semantic thing. I I just don't necessarily see anybody leaving that is a, like, head or director of a Power 5 conference.
Like I'm trying to think like ACC, like who would that be? Who would they even be? I don't know.
Yeah, like, I would say Wake is settled, he's not gonna go for the Tennessee job.
I,
Um,
are we sure?
I
Like,
I think so,
okay,
yeah. I could have seen him go for Colorado,
sure.
but for Tennessee,
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
don't know.
as sure.
I like. What about Brian Bell at Syracuse?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that would be a good one for him. I don't know how much momentum that would gain on either side, though. It makes it, like, as a good
It
hire, I
makes
think,
sense.
for
Yeah,
yeah,
dude.
yeah, it makes
Yeah,
sense.
I think he's a good coach.
Yeah,
All right. Yeah, I don't know. I agree with you. I don't love a lot of the like fits though. It's not. It's a hard job to place for sure.
yeah. I is there like a group of 5 school that we're not thinking of that? I mean, like,
I mean, I don't know.
yeah. I
Could it
don't think
would
I
it
don't.
be like Darren Gosson at New Mexico? Would would
Yeah,
would he would he go all the way? Yeah, I mean, could it happen?
you don't think Rob Connor's ever leaving Portland, do you?
I would be shocked if he
Okay.
ever left Portland.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
I don't think
Maybe
so.
he will. I would be shocked if he did though.
Okay. Yeah. I don't think he would either. But he's an interesting name. Like, it's like that kind of guy, right? Where it's like you're at a program that is successful on the national stage for a non-power 5 school, that, like, it's someone in that mold. And but I don't can't figure out who that specific person is.
Yeah, it's gonna bug me because I don't know either. So okay, well we're gonna move off of this because I think we're just gonna wrap our heads. We're gonna
Yeah.
bang our
Yeah.
heads
Yeah.
against the wall trying to figure this out. Um, and by the way, I just want to throw this out there to everyone. That was all speculation. We don't
Yes.
know. We don't know anything. I just don't aggregate this, but someone will. I know how this works. Anyways, um, Ben, let's talk about something that will change our sport as we know it.
Everything.
I mean, it will change everything. And that is the NCAA settlement. Do you want to take this? Should I take this?
I will let you lay it out because I think you have a better handle on it. I have some. I'll fill in any points that I feel like we haven't touched on, but I think you taking the lead here is good.
Okay, so on Thursday, the House versus the NCAA settlement was filed. Still needs to be approved by a federal judge, but it is basically to settle a series of antitrust lawsuits over 10 years that will pay out $2.8 billion to athletes who missed out on NIL deals from 2017 to 2020. Our guy Ben's getting the paycheck. Let's go
I'm getting
now.
an $8 check. I can't wait.
And then they're going to tax it too. It's going to be great.
Oh yeah.
But Ben's going to get Ben's going to be able to buy like 3 packs of gum. And on top of that, they are now also allowing schools, Division One. I do not think this applies to D2 or D3. And frankly, I don't even think it would really matter. But schools are now able to pay their athletes via the athletic department revenue. The Power Five schools can pay up to $21 million annually to these athletes. How they split it up, how it happens, like it still seems like it's all still very tentative and
We can all guess where the majority of that money is going to go.
cross country. No, not at all. And on top of that, the most important part and part of all of this is that there are now also new scholarship limits and there are now new roster limits. By the way, anyone who's saying that there's no more scholarship limits, that's just it's not. It's weird. It's bad language. It's bad verbiage. The scholarships for cross country men and women are now both at 17. The roster spots are also at 17. So basically, there's a scholarship opportunity for every roster spot. The track and field, there's 45 scholarships, both men and women. And if you run cross country and track, I've been told that that will count towards both. So in terms of the, yeah, did you
Which
not
is
know that?
significant. Like
Yeah,
that's like that's huge, right? Like the
right. So
fact that
basically,
you're
go ahead.
counting 2 or 3 times basically.
Right. So basically, if you are going to have your entire cross country team also be your entire distance crew on the track, then in theory, if let's assuming that we're maxing out scholarships here, let's just
Right.
make that assumption, then in theory, then you only have 28 scholarships left for everything else. Even more distance if you want to. It's just those distance guys won't even
Well,
be
and even if you're not giving 17 scholarships, you only have 17 roster spots. Like it's like even in if you're not giving everyone those full ride, like all that money, you're still going to be maxed out no matter what.
and that's where this gets tricky. Now, I believe, and I don't know this for a fact, and I don't have this exact detail correct, but I believe that the Power Five schools must abide by these new regulations. Okay, meaning that when they do pay out athletic department revenue, they'll have to then follow these regulations. However, all of the let me see, I want to get this right specifically. It's the group of 5 schools, the FCS, the non-football playing Division One programs. Those are not bound by these new roster limits, these new rules, if they do not share revenue. So if they don't share revenue, then according to Ross Dellinger at Yahoo Sports, that does not apply to them, which is an
So
extremely interesting caveat. Go ahead.
yeah, and just to go a little bit more detailed. So basically, if they're not paying their athletes outside of like on top of their scholarships, or independent of their scholarships, those universities will be allowed to have as many roster spots for their or they won't have these
Right,
certain
it won't be
roster
whatever the
limits
restrictions are now.
that other schools will.
Um, what is your initial interpretation of everything?
So I mean, it's really interesting. I think we've touched on the roster bit a bunch because I really think that is like kind of the thing that's flown under the radar, where it's like that is significant for cross country. Like it is not like 17 is not a big amount.
No.
Like for like I just my own experience at Belmont, like we were not a big program, and we had small teams, like but we were at 12 to 15 guys, like, and again, that was a smaller group. And so a lot of these big universities where you had like a lot of scholarship guys, but then you had a ton of walk-ons in different like situations there. Those like opportunities are now going to be gone, which I think is really a bummer. For it's like, hey, you grew up in Tuscaloosa, for example. You're not good enough to warrant a scholarship. You're, let's say you're a 420 miler coming out of high school on the men's side, or you're like a 510 miler on the women's side. You're you The opportunity for you to get a roster spot is going to be so much more difficult because of these rules now, than it ever has been before. Because I mean, before, hey, coach, sure, we'll take a flyer on you. We're not paying you anything. You can be on the team. No skin off our back, really. Now that is going to be significantly different, and I'm curious to see how this if this changes at all, like the way coaches coach their teams, the way they train, because it's not like you have uh 20 guys or 30 guys to be able to say, hey, like, 8 guys got hurt this year. That's okay. We got 20 more. Like, if 8 guys get hurt, you don't have you have
You're done.
a 7-person roster, pretty much, 7 to 9 band roster, and that's it.
Yeah.
So I am very curious to just see how that plays out.
Yeah, it's great, and, like, it's also very easy for 8 guys just to not be available.
Yes.
2
Oh yes.
2, 3 guys get injured, 1 guy gets ill, 1 guy has to go for a job interview across the country, someone's family member, is not doing well, and they have to go care tend to them, and all of a sudden, you have very little to work with, and it's a scary realization. Now, I think the fear is that in order to fund the 20 new scholarships that are now being allowed into football,
Mhm.
a lot of schools are going to be saying, well, how are they going to make up these costs? In theory, that could leave track and field and cross country on the chopping block, as well as other non-revenue driving sports, wrestling, swimming, etc. Um, and on top of that, the roster limits. I mean, Ben, this time next year, the transfer portal is going to be booming.
Oh, it's gonna be wild.
It's going to be awful. But but I do want to throw this out there and have everyone think about this. This is going to apply, all these things that I just said will apply to the Power Five. But how many of those non-Power Five schools, how many of those
Yep.
mid-major schools are really going to have the athletic department revenue to pay out these kids? They're not. And like Frank, who would that be? Is it Gonzaga for their men's basketball team? Maybe, yeah. So maybe Gonzaga now has to follow this. I don't know that for a fact. I'm just throwing that
Yep.
out there. But like, think about it. Every mid-major program that's competitive at football. Tulane. Think like Tulane. What's going to happen there? Just is Tulane going to start doing payouts? And if so, is that going to impact their program at all? So, but because those mid majors are not doing, may not do, I should say,
Yep.
may not do the revenue share, they don't have to cut kids in theory. They don't have to. So
And that is an advantage in one way, but and I think that's almost more of an advantage for teams that are either right on the national bubble or are like right below that tier, where it's like, hey, you can just stock up on men and women. You're not going to get the cream of the crop in terms of international or uh like domestic recruits, but hey, you can take a lot of lottery tickets and just hope that a couple of them hit and hit pretty well. I'm curious for a school like, I mean, NAU. Like, what is this going to look like for them, where they are the program on the cross country side? Are they going to be able to be competitive if they're not able to offer paying athletes, essentially, for these top recruits? Is that going to play a role? And underlying all this, how many programs are actually going to be paying cross country and
right,
track runners? Like
right.
that's the thing we don't really know yet, because you can easily see like most programs or most universities saying, hey, this juice isn't worth the squeeze, like for us to pay athletes that are playing in sports that are
Well,
non-revenue.
they might have to. And I don't know what the Title IX
Right, yeah.
challenges that. There's
Well,
Title IX.
yeah, I wonder if I mean, Title IX, obviously, that can be split up on, like, men and women's basketball and, like, football
Right,
throws a wrinkle in there
right,
for that,
but I still don't know if it's just like I don't know if there's some kind of if there would be any rule or regulation. I just don't know
yeah.
that would say like, well, these teams get it, but these teams don't. And so it's I think I don't know if like anyone really knows right now.
No.
I
They're still
have
ironing
no
out, I
idea.
think, a lot of these things.
Yeah, which is crazy because this is it's set to start next year, assuming that this judge approves it. Which I'm like, we have you're just gonna have kids flood the portal. Like, and frankly, like that actually, in theory, might be the best thing for the mid majors, right? Because if they
Yep,
don't distribute revenue, they don't have to follow the roster limits, and now there's a pool of kids who are at Power Five schools who were then cut and are now going down, to a different level.
yep.
So I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing that I keep coming back to is how is this really going to fundamentally change our sports, right? In terms of, hey, I'm sure there are some schools and there's going to be some athletes that are worth paying for, because especially for Power Five schools that are already going to be paying, like they're already going to have these limits. But is this really going to affect a lot of the teams that we see compete year in and year out at national championships for cross country? I'm curious to see how that affect that what the effect is there. One question, more global question for you: is this the right direction for the NCAA to be going in? In other words, is this settlement a good thing in your mind for collegiate athletics, specifically in kind of the realm that we occupy?
Um. Well, collegiate athletics and cross country and track, it's very different.
Sure.
You can make the argument that like this is good for cross country and track. Like there's now more scholarships available for schools to now go in. Which, by the way, they don't have to match
They're
the
maxims.
17.
They're
They're
not
maximum. They
minimums.
do not have to do that, right? So I guess we have to wait and see.
Yep.
Um, in theory, the more scholarship money to top recruits is great. Bumping off kids and cutting them off at 17 roster spots is not
That just seems
ideal.
strange to me. Like, what do you think the reasoning is there? Like, if you're gonna cap, I guess, I mean, if you're gonna have like a quote unquote salary cap for the university, you're gonna have like a scholarship limit. Why the need to cap the roster sizes?
Because they want to cap roster sizes everywhere. Like they want to match the roster. They're going off of the scholarship limit model into the roster limit model, which is
Right.
ridiculous because all it's just doing is just matching the scholarship with the roster limits. It just makes no sense.
Yeah, I mean, which takes away like a fully funded program. It's like you could split up scholarships. You could either have scholarships of one person, just have this. Like now, if
Like
you're a fully
17 is
funded
not
program,
enough.
everybody's getting one. Like, and
So
that's not really how collegiate track and field
So I'll say
works.
this. I'll keep trying to make this brief and not cut it down. I sincerely do believe that the NCAA football realm could be just as big as the NFL in 20 years.
Yeah,
In terms of like potential revenue, in terms of its grasp and hold. I mean, I it's now becoming like a hey, now we can pay these kids, and now like things are going to be way more transactional. And so I think it's going to be big from like an athletic standpoint and NCAA perspective. Cross country and track, it is hard. It's hard to know. I'm gonna say that this is likely not a good thing, just because I can see the gap from the top schools to the bottom schools widening. Kids are going to be cut from Power Five programs. Um, it's just going to be difficult. Schools will there will be some programs that do get cut for sure. I just don't know who. And so ultimately I'll say that for cross country and track, this is a bad thing.
yeah, yeah. No, so I think similarly, and just quickly to your point, on the NCAA football getting to almost NFL levels. Basically, like we're saying, a $21 million salary cap for Power Five conference schools. So, I mean, what is that? Is that like 60, or no, that's more than that, 70 teams, um, 80 schools.
I don't know. I
Something
don't
like
know.
that. Anyway, so it's more than double the amount of of teams that are in the NFL. And you think about where the salary cap was for the NFL 25 years ago. What do you think it was?
Oh, this is a good question. Do we know what it is now? What's the actual number now? Do we know?
It's like I think it's close to 200 at this
Okay.
point. I think it's like one, or it's over 200, 255. Excuse me.
Okay, 255, and we want to know what it was back in 25 years ago.
Yeah, 1999.
No, was it 100 mil?
According to SpotRack.com, was 57.3. So, I mean, really, you're talking about college sports being probably less than a quarter of a decade behind, which is
It's
pretty
pretty.
wild
Yeah. No, look, am I just getting over my skis here?
for
Maybe.
a quarter of a
Maybe.
decade.
Very, very, very possible.
Yeah, yeah.
The NFL will continue to grow and be big and be massive and yada, 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 yada. But you can now begin to see ways in terms of like where the momentum of NCAA revenue and the things that will get pushed and the cost that will be cut, you can now begin to see how this will avalanche and build momentum. And now like you're not going, like we didn't come to college to play school, Ben. Okay, as a great philosopher once said. But it's gonna be really interesting.
Well,
And yeah,
yeah, and I think we should touch on that real quick, because yeah, I think there is the idea of, hey, and the NCAA has always pushed this like heavy-handedly so, and self-servingly so, that athletes are student athletes. They're coming in as student athletes to get an education and then play a sport along the way, essentially. But we're getting to this point where this is becoming professional, like especially for these revenue generating sports. And again, this is less and less the case with our sports. But like there is a legitimate sense of like the priority is going to be your sport if you are
yep,
getting paid to do it.
yep,
Like, quite frankly, that is, and everybody's going to have their eyes wide open to that, whether it's from an athletic department, from a teacher, from a coach, from an athlete. Like,
yep.
if you're getting paid, that is the number one thing. Um, and there's some nasty ripple effects to that. I think there's a lot of good for athletes getting the money that they deserve, based off of the value they're providing, but it does kind of open the door to kind of just this weird in between
Yeah.
amateur and professional uh level, which I don't know how we're going to navigate that moving forward.
Well, I mean, it gets you to beg the question, like, and I'm actually not so much worried about this in track and cross country,
Yeah.
but more so like, you think about the other sports. I'm like, how many of those, like, we're all worried about like, how many classes do these guys go to anyways, kind of deal. And now it's like, well, why would they? Like, well, if you're a quarterback at a school, right? Um, and you're getting paid like, so yeah, in order for this to happen, like kids getting paid is a good thing. It's
Yes.
absolutely a good thing. But in order for it to happen, the transition period is going to be ugly, and it had to
Yes.
be ugly, and it's not going to be pretty, and it's going to be dirty, and there's going to be some issues that come up. But
And
we had to take the leap.
yeah, and to kind of answer the question I posed you in terms of whether or not it's good or not, I think ultimately it is, because we had kind of gotten to a point with this NIL situation where we were already kind of entering this gray
Yeah,
area, and like the rise of like NIL collectives and like and situations where it's like they were effectively getting paid through the university via boosters and like not really for endorsement. It was the intention for the NIL deals changed almost immediately from like the original endorsement level idea to like, all right, we're just gonna have a pool of money pulled by together by boosters to pay athletes. And so I do think moving away from that to more of a like a salary cap kind of structure of something that's a little bit more above board, a more regulated kind of system, I think is going to be just a dramatic improvement from just this NIL collective situation, which was unregulated. There, you heard these horror stories of these kids being promised certain money and then it being pulled away, and like these different, like there was just no good oversight. And it's going to take some time for there to be good oversight over this, but at least there seems to be a structure moving forward where there can be and there has to be in order for every school and athlete to be able to compete at this level.
It was it was so funny. You watch like one of those SEC O linemen and like a commercial. Hi, I'm Bob Jones, and I love these Kia cars. Like it was like I was like, this is just funneling money. Like this is ridiculous. What are we doing? So, yeah, I think I agree with a lot of your sentiment, a lot of your points. For cross country and track, worried. It's tough.
Do you so I know you mentioned the chopping block
I
issue
do
of
I
like,
do
hey,
think there's going to be at least a couple schools. Yeah,
so what's the profile of that school though? I'm curious
Power
because
Five.
do you think it is going to be Power
It,
Five?
it's well because Power Five. I think if I'm correct on this, Power Five has to, and even if even let's just say they don't have to. I'm pretty sure they have to though. I'm pretty sure they must adopt that. But for all those Power Five programs that now have to pay out the athletes, right? Well, they're
Mhm.
going to just heavily go into because now not only are they paying the athletes from the athletic department revenue, they have
Yep.
to fund those 20 extra football scholarships. They don't have to, but they will
Right, they will.
to keep up with the rest of the NCAA. So where is all this money coming from? Well, it ain't going to come from track. And we had just talked about it. Carlson was making 200K. Like, I mean, it's going to happen. At least one major Power Five program will drop. I don't know if it'll be this year. I don't know if it'll be next year. I think it'll actually take a couple of years to shake out
Yeah.
because no one really knows the details yet. But I'd be worried.
Yeah, and I will say I think like cross country and track in general is a little safer than a lot of these other programs just by the fact that hey, if you have one athlete competing in three different sports, you don't have to pay to as much to fund three different sports as you would if they weren't
That's a
that
good
one
point.
athlete
Okay.
playing in each one. So I think there is a little bit of safety there, especially on the women's side, because they're going to have to keep up the Title IX, I would imagine, in terms of the number of sports they're sponsoring, and there already is a limit, or there is a minimum that you have amount of sports that you have to sponsor
Right.
in order to be eligible as a university. So I do think there is a lot of benefit and efficiency when it comes to cross country and indoor and outdoor track and field. But I hear you. I mean, they like a lower level Power Five school that's trying to say, hey, like we want to make a hard push to be competitive in football now. Let's just say like a school that was in my own backyard, Vanderbilt decides, hey, we want to be competitive in the SEC in football now. How are we going
Well,
to fix that?
they've had a lot of time to do that. They have
Yeah,
not
well,
successfully not
but I do
succeeded.
wonder if there are going to be schools like that are like, all right, like this like transition period. This is our time to make our mark. Like this is
I
a
don't think it would be Vanderbilt, but yeah, I
no,
mean,
I agree. Yeah,
yeah,
Vanderbilt's not the they almost
it's just an
certainly will not.
example. Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah, the example of that kind of program where it's like, hey, like we haven't been competitive. Let's make a push, and they already don't have men's track and
yeah,
field.
men's track.
So
Yeah, so
um,
yeah, so maybe not the best example, but the point standing, I do think there's going to be a cut. It's going to be a major one, and we're going to be like, oh no. I mean, Clemson was just cut what 2 years
yeah,
ago when it was recent, right? It was the last couple of years.
mhm, yeah,
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 and so like if they were already on the fritz, and now this is coming in? Like, ooh, I
Well, and the dirty little secret is a lot of these athletic programs aren't profitable as it is.
that's true.
Uh, and so like them having another line on their expense report is not going to make them any more profitable. So it this could cause a reckoning of sorts. Even as more and more TV money is coming in, uh, running athletic departments has already been expensive, but it just got a heck of a lot more expensive.
Yes, yes, it did. And you know who is sitting there, popping popcorn in their chair, watching the world burn? Do you know who that is?
I don't think I know who you're talking about.
It's the Ivy League. The
Oh
Ivy
yeah,
League is sitting there like, we don't give scholarships anyways. So, yeah, that's the Ivy League.
yeah, yeah. Hey, and again, that's the model of like you can be competitive. Like it's harder, but like you can
Yeah,
still be competitive even in a world where you're not competing financially with the biggest programs. So obviously they have advantages in other ways, but hey, you figure out your competitive advantage and you press it, and you can be successful despite not having the same resources. So I think this is going to could open up a divide even further, but it's still it's not going to be impossible for programs to still compete.
no, no, I don't think we're saying that this is like the end all be all. It's
Right.
not, but it, it's like I said at the beginning of the summer. I said this is going to get a lot uglier before
Yep.
it gets prettier. And whether or not you heeded that warning, I don't know. I'm talking to you, Ben. No, I'm just playing. But whether or not you all heeded that warning, I do not know. But I said it, and and look where we're at. And so, and unfortunately, the worst part, it will probably now get even uglier.
Oh
So,
yeah,
yeah,
it's going to be absolute chaos for the last couple of years, for the next couple of years, and especially I think on in the non-revenue generating sports, because it's like for football and basketball, it's like all right, we have this money, we're gonna go for it, like we're gonna do it, like and there's going to be there's going to be a transition period there, but then there's going to be all these other sports where it's like all right, what are we going to do? Like
what are we
we're
doing?
not going
Yeah.
to go all out, but are we going to do anything? Or are we going to do some? How much is some? Like what does this look like? How do our rosters look like? It's going to be a absolute wild west for the next couple years.
Well, Ben, in that case, we should go take a nap.
Yeah,
Because actually, I still have to write rankings. I don't know what I'm even saying. Like, so I
I got
gotta
to
go
go
write
take care of two
this.
kids, so
Yeah, it's
I
like the
won't be
same
sleeping.
thing. It's like the same thing. You have to keep two humans alive. I have to, please our readers here at TSR. But well, Ben, nice job today. Go leave a rating and review on Apple and Spotify. Thank you to those who did this past week. We're on YouTube. Go check out YouTube, please. Rankings top 50. By the time you're listening to this, the D1 stuff should all be out. And I
Wow,
thought that was pretty good. So
crazy.
yeah, and then we'll shortly after that start team rankings. So I actually have to get on top of that too.
Oh man,
Um,
that's gonna give me an aneurysm. That's gonna be there. There's gonna be so many hard decisions there. Individual rankings are hard, but there's at least a level of like, all right, you're looking at one T first profile
right,
with team ones. It's like,
right,
all right, well, let me think
that,
about the 15 people that are on this team.
right, right. Well, I don't have a good lead off to that. So
No, no,
yeah,
that's I
unfortunately,
did not set you up for success there.
no, you did not. It's
But
okay.
but yeah, we will have plenty to talk about with the individual rankings in the next couple weeks. There will be plenty to kind of refresh on, and then head into those team rankings, which will be like I said, just as exciting. But until next week, when we have plenty of rankings and probably some breaking news to talk about, I'll talk to you.
I'll talk to you.